attracted you to this project, to joining up?
I was asked, I think after they'd already shot a lot of it, voiced a lot of it and everything. I think I came into it a little bit later, which for me, growing up without a television and without really access to movies, I'm quite, unfortunately, ignorant about a lot of things that I should know about in our society and pop culture and everything. So I didn't necessarily, I mean, obviously I'd heard about Tron, but I hadn't seen the prior movies and so forth. So to me, this was my first introduction to it, and I came and they sent me a clip of what they had so far of the graphics and everything, and I just thought it was really quite phenomenal for series animated television, and so I wanted to jump on board.
Is that an odd task to be voicing a grid as opposed to, I mean, even a program is sort of a human character type thing?
Yeah, well, yeah, because the programs they do have, I mean, you know, I watched Beck's Beginning last night, and they certainly have emotion. And so with the grid, you know, the real challenge, the first session was kind of the most important for figuring out who it was, because that's when we tried, you know, Charlie and Adam and everyone said, okay, we want this voice to just be this pleasant kind of voice. They explained a little bit about what it was. And so we tried it a few times, a little bit more sultry, a little bit more straightforward, a little bit, you know, and then they obviously direct me to tell me what they finalize on is what we have, obviously, and just this very pleasant voice. Not my own voice, this very pleasant kind of on-star voice, and which can kind of be disconcerting. In one way, that's sort of the character, to me, of the grid, is what's happening around, how this staying pleasant, is how you interpret it, how the audience interprets it by what's going on. I mean, if you're in a train crash, and she's got the exact same inflection in her voice as she does when she's welcoming new programs to the grid, you're like, you know, so to me it's a little bit more the perception of the voice than necessarily the voice itself.
Now, you've been voicing a lot of kind of AI robotic characters in Mass Effect, you know, in Battlestar Galactica, now the grid in this. Do you find it easier or harder to voice something that's kind of without emotion, kind of detached, as opposed to an actual person?
The grid to me has been fairly, you know, I'm quick in and out of the room because you can't really change it too much. A couple of sessions further on, we tried a little bit. I keep saying the train crash because that was one in particular where we tried having her have a little bit more, I don't know, enthusiasm or something, a different inflection in her voice, and we ended up going back to just this pleasant kind of one voice. So it in one way it's easier because you really are constricted more to a sound. As opposed to if you're playing something with a little bit more emotion and that, and you can try it different ways. And I also don't have to do all the fight sounds and things like that, which can be a lot of fun. Granted, I've done them a lot with Queen of Blades and even some with Edie in Mass Effect 3. But you know, obviously, the sixes in Battlestar were a lot different. So to me, I looked at her as more human in many ways. Edie, in Mass Effect, I definitely looked as more of a robot, but then with a little bit of a cheeky side as she took on the body. With the grid, I'm definitely feeling her more. To be honest, I don't even see her as a person, as a being. To me, she really is a computer voice.
You've been involved with so many projects now, you know, starting with Battlestar Galactica now up to this one, but you know, kind of aiming straight at like the, you know, Con geek type audience. Like how connected do you feel at this point to that type of culture, and like how important has it been to your career?
Oh, it's been hugely important. I mean, Battlestar was my first job essentially. I'd been acting for a year, so. And I think I got lucky getting that job because that kind of Sci-Fi Channel was sort of not, you know, they wanted to go out to a name, and I certainly was not a name, you know, a year into acting. That none of the other people would take the job, so I'm kind of got it because no bigger actors wanted it, and then it became what it became, and Sci-Fi Channel was certainly built. You know, it was just the flagship show for a while. I think it's amazing. I mean, I love the genre. I definitely, in some ways, kind of want to smack myself when I go home from these things, going, "You're a hypocrite. You don't play video games, but you voice video games. You haven't watched all the things, but yet you." But you know, to me, you know, you can't have seen everything, and I'm going into it as I'm playing this character, and aside from having to know what's going on in the room, but as a voice, with voice acting, you're often doing things before any graphics are even done, so you don't have anything to base it off of anyway, and you know, a lot of the video games are just, they're just in somebody's head at that point, so you don't have anything to base it off of. Whereas Tron, obviously, there was, you know, the whole history and everything like that, and so I do have to play a little catch up to know what's going on fully.
A lot of the projects that you worked on have dealt with sort of the encroachment of the mechanical and the digital into the human world. And you joked about the OnStar voice, and we've got Siri now that we talk to. Do you think about that a little bit more than maybe the average person, of like how much we're becoming, we're really directly interacting with our machinery now?
We are, yeah, and I guess maybe I do think about it. I don't know if I necessarily think about it more than other people. I think in one way I look at it in the reverse. I find it very funny that I play a lot of these roles, but I'm a complete tech idiot. I mean, I honestly, I mean, I'm just new to the iPhone, and I mean, I have to have a computer tech set the bloody thing up for me. Like, I don't know. I'm really a computer idiot. So I find it very funny that I play all these advanced mechanical characters that are like either threatening to take over our human society or, you know, really what we're going to be relying on in the future. And I, you know, obviously with technology growing every day, yeah, I do see the convergence, you know, continuing. And that's one of the things about Battlestar that I actually thought was, you know, I was never really into, well, I hadn't really seen much of it, but fantasy type stuff. But what I liked about Battlestar was that it was, to me, it was very realistic of what could happen in the future, because it wasn't funny-headed creatures and things like that. It was technology, and technology, you know, trying to overtake at some point, and so that's, I think we could very well end up in a Battlestar type situation, long down into the future, hopefully, but or a Tron type situation or something.
Well, the Tron would be cool. The computers, that'd be awesome.
Maybe I'd finally get to figure out what makes it tick then.
How do you relate to playing the grid as an action fan if you're not so computer savvy?
Well, you know, with all the characters that you play, you definitely, even if you're playing a robot, you have to attach something to, you know, it's a character, it's a being. With the grid, that is the first character that I've actually played that I don't see as a being. To me, she is a computer voice. So I haven't figured out quite what she is, but to me, she is just a computer voice that somebody else has programmed, which is probably not the right thing. But as opposed to Edie in Mass Effect, even though she was a robot, and more in 3 than 2, but she was kind of evolving and growing and things like that. So to me, there's some learning as a being, as this being that she was. There's a learning, and so that she's a thing to me. The grid isn't a thing to me. The grid is that part of the computer that thinks and does everything, but I don't quite know what it is.
As a voice and not someone who plays the games, what were your thoughts on the controversial ending of Mass Effect 2?
Well, I'm actually recording something on Monday, so you know, I think every ending is always not going to upset everybody or, you know, make everybody happy. Every ending always upsets a certain part of the fan base. But there was enough backlash from that obviously that I heard that I think it's made them go out and do a little bit more onto it. So I don't know exactly. I've actually got to play it tomorrow.
Yeah, is that a weird thing that since it's a game, it isn't necessarily the ending. It can evolve and you can keep adding to it.
You can keep adding, and I think the thing was they had said that was going to be the last game of that series, right? I think is that part of why there was such backlash is they were like, that can't be the end. But yeah, with games you can kind of keep evolving and keep going as opposed to a finality of something else. Yeah.
We have time for one more question.
Since your first job with Battlestar and now, I know you've done a lot of really great roles. What stays with you with those roles? In moments? Is it scenes? Is it mannerisms? What stays with you the most?
That's an interesting question. There's different things that stay with you. Either something that surprised you, maybe some emotion that came out. I mean, there was a scene in Battlestar in particular that I don't know if you all have seen it or haven't or what.
Probably.
But there's a scene in Pegasus where Gina, you meet Gina for the first time. She's the beaten up, tortured one chained to the floor, and we had originally planned it just this, and she's trying to reach for food that Baltar brings her, and kind of we had originally thought of it as just she's just kind of too weak to really do anything, and something came over me, and I just started heaving, sobbing once I grabbed the apple, and I just started bawling, and it brought something to that scene. I think they cut out of it fairly quick too, but the director Michael Reimer came into me right after. He's like, "Did you plan that?" I'm like, "No, it just sort of came out." And it's weird how that can sort of tap into something. And James Callis was crying, and he's like, "I don't know, you know." So I think things like that nobody knows about because unless you're on set that day, because it didn't necessarily make it to the final airing. And I think then funny stories and things that happen, and then more when people talk to you about their experience with it, like a lot of our servicemen and women really Battlestar resonates with them, and so to hear some people come up to you and say, you know, you really helped me get through a tough time, or you know, somebody that was suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder and could relate somehow to the Gina character having been beaten and tortured, and somehow it helped them get over a tough point. You're like, wow, I just played a role, but it really, that's I think more what sticks with you than necessarily, you know, seeing yourself on the screen or something like that. It's hearing those odd stories of how it helped somebody or just made somebody get through a tough time in any way, or just made them laugh. I think those are things that stick with me.
If I could quickly follow up to that, now that it's been a few years since Battlestar, are you hearing different things from people who've gone back and watched the entire series again at that time?
Yeah, and also people that are picking it up now for the first time because they were too young, maybe when it started coming out 8 years ago or something, you know, or that have discovered it, you know, discovered other things in it that then they rewatch. And I think that's one of the things with science fiction over other, maybe, you know, just a lawyer show or whatever. You can go back and quite often you will see things that you didn't see the first time because the worlds are so vast and there's so much more going on than in just your typical lawyer or doctor show.